Hey guys, so I'm on a road trip and just had an interesting fan-related experience, and I thought I would share it with you guys. First of all, I'm on a road trip from Wisconsin to Detroit. I've got a gospel music gig in Detroit tomorrow night with a friend of mine that I used to work with when I lived in Virginia back over 10 years ago. And I did some songs for his CD that's coming out, and this is the CD release concert, so I'm on my way to Detroit. And it's a Sunday, so most of the restores aren't open. The Chicago ones are, but Metal Pete and I have both been there recently, and so has Jeff, and so has at least one other person, maybe Tommy. So I didn't bother stopping at any restores. But coincidentally, a week or so ago, someone had sent me a link to a bunch of those cast SMCs for sale on Craigslist or OfferUp or one of those sites in Michigan. And at the time, I don't think this gig was confirmed, but I was interested because those aren't very common. In fact, as far as I know, I have the only ones in the U.S. I got them out of an ice rink that had several more of them, so that ice rink has some too, and those are all labeled ERS. But as far as I know, no other cast SMCs, the 56-inch industrials, have turned up in the U.S. A handful have turned up in Canada, usually with they labeled Wilco or Wilcorp, and a ton of them have turned up overseas. Tice has some, and so I was like, well, yeah, I've been wanting some more of those just because of the ice skating rink. I was like, man, I hope that the guy who took them out of the ice skating rink can send me some more of them, because he was replacing a lot of them, and I was really, hoping. So I've been looking for some more. Just it's one of those things. It's rare and cool enough that I'd like to have multiples. And so this listing was pretty cool. So it had 8 fans, and the listing was for $30. And so I emailed the guy and asked, hey, is it $30 for all of them? And he said, no, it's $30 each. And I said, how much for all of them? And he said $150. So that's, less than $20 a fan. And in the ad, they looked either filthy or in bad shape, and it was impossible to know which. And you take a risk, because if they're filthy, you don't know if they're going to be immaculate underneath or really bad or somewhere in between. For less than $20 a piece for something rare and cast, I'll take a chance. Especially because I already restored 2 of them that were in really terrible shape. And, so I know it doesn't matter how bad they are, I can save them. As long as the windings are good. So, at some point after I talked to the seller, my gig got confirmed. And I was like, well, great. They're basically right on my route. They're a little bit off route, but not much. I can, I can get them on my trip to Michigan. And so, emailed the seller and basically said, hey, look, I can pick them up. I was originally shooting for my trip back, because on my trip I'm trying to make it there in time tonight, and I had to work this morning at church, so I have a real tight time frame, and I was trying not to add any stops. Other than Portillo's, of course, which I always stop at. So, it was kind of clear from the seller that Tuesday wasn't going to work real well for him. He's like, basically, he only had an hour window on Tuesday when he was free, and I couldn't guarantee that hour would be the same hour that I would be passing through. So I said, okay, well, what about Sunday? And he said, Sunday I'm free all day. And I said, great, I'll let you know what time I'm passing through, but here's the thing, can you please take the blades off them? Because they were all pictured with the blades on in the ad. Can you please take the blades off of them? I will not have time to take them apart. Because I'm going to be rushing trying to make it to work. Because I'm working in Wisconsin, then I'm working in Detroit, and I won't have time for a long stop. It takes a while to take the blades off, so can you help me with that? He said, sure, I've got my impact tools. I'll get the blades off, no problem. So, okay. So I, get my route planned out, and I, figure out what time I'm going to get there. And he wants to meet at Menards. There's a Menards, right off route, and he says that his storage unit is literally a couple blocks from the Menards. So I'm like, well, can't you just give me the address to the storage unit? He's like, no, we got to meet at Menards. So, okay, well, we'll meet at Menards. And I pull up to the Menards, and I'm a few minutes early, and it turns out the Menards close. Everything closes earlier in Michigan, apparently. And there's a few cars in the parking lot. Most of them don't have people in it. One car does have a guy in it, and he looks very different than the guy in the ad. Oh, by the way, so the one thing I forgot to tell is I'm going back and forth with the guy on OfferUp or whatever it was, and when I'm like, okay, I can come, Tuesday. He's like, I've got a guy that wants a couple of them on Friday. I'm going to sell them on Friday unless you can come before that. I'm like, look, I'm coming from out of town. I'll buy all of them. He's like, well, you got to send Western Union. So, Western Union is almost always a red flag for me. When somebody asks for Western Union, that's a red flag to me. Either not to trust them, or just maybe they're very trustworthy, but they're just not somebody I can do business with, because if they're not savvy enough to have PayPal, and they're not trusting enough to know that I'll come based on me, setting a time and saying, giving them all kinds of details to let them know I'm not going to stand them up, offering to pay ahead of time, etc. So usually that's a red flag for me. So, somebody says Western Union, I always just say, I don't do Western Union, but I do PayPal. And so I ended up sending him PayPal. But going back and forth with the guy, I kind of got the impression that he was a douchebag. And so I was talking to the guy that sent me the ad in the first place, and I'm like, well, I think this guy's a douchebag. And he's like, why? Because he asked for Western Union? I might ask for Western Union just to make sure you're not going to stand me up. And I'm like, I can't explain why, but I can just tell. Sometimes talking to somebody, you can just tell. So anyhow, so fast forward, and I'm driving to the Menards. And, a few blocks away from the Menards, I see a nice storage facility. It's not like a real fancy one. Like, Nia used to have an indoor storage facility where you take a freight elevator and you go and everything's air conditioned and it's all inside this big warehouse. And it wasn't fancy like that. It was just one of the plain outdoor, just a giant building with a lot of garages. But it's nice, It's, a well-maintained storage facility. So I'm like, okay, that must be where his storage is. So get to the Menards, and there's only a couple other cars there. And so I pull up closest to the Menards doors, because I figure, okay, it's an empty parking lot. I gotta get some water. It's an empty parking lot. No way they'll miss me if I'm parked right by the door. So I'm parked there, and a guy gets out and walks over to my car. And he doesn't look or sound anything like the guy I'm communicating with. So I'm like, hey, name, the guy's name. And he's like, no, different name. And I'm like, okay, so did he send somebody? And he's like, actually, I'm just parked over there. I just need a jump. So he's got nothing to do with my fans. So I'm like, okay, no problem. I'll give you a jump. And as I'm driving over to give him a jump, a guy in a big green truck starts honking just rapidly and waving. And so, and I wave back and try to point that I'm going to jump the guy, and the guy in the green pickup truck just floors it and takes off. So, I call, the guy and say, hey, that's you, right? Because I just offered to go jump this guy, so I got to do that first. And he's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But you can tell by his tone, he's very pissed that I agreed to go jump this guy. So, I jump the guy, and his car starts up. It takes a couple of tries, but his car starts up fine. And the guy in the green pickup has circled around a couple of times. And so I follow him, and we're going in the direction of the storage units. But before he can turn off onto the street, he's taking a back roads way. but it still looks like the way to the storage unit. But before he can turn off onto the street, he pulls up on the curb, on the grass, into this field. And when I say field, you usually think of either grass or corn. This was, you could tell there's grass there under some things, but the vast majority of it was mud. And what wasn't mud was abandoned cars and a bunch of those sheds that you can buy at Menards and Home Depot and just kind of set up in your yard. And so he pulls up next to one of the sheds and, says, okay, the fans are in here. So he opens up the shed. Sorry, I was getting a drink of water. And, where's my cup holder? Don't you hate it when you can't find a cup holder when you need it? So he opens up the shed, and he says, you got a flashlight on your phone? And I'm like, no, my phone actually is too old. It doesn't have a flashlight app. And, I could probably download one, but my battery does. Anyhow, I don't have a flashlight on my phone. So I'm like, no. And he's, God damn it, he's really upset. So he goes back to his truck, and he digs around a while for a flashlight. And, I can see in there that the fans are just piled, and there's, like, stuff piled on them. There's heaters and 8-foot fluorescent lights and other random scrap metal and equipment just piled on them. Blades are still on, of course. And so he's like, I just hurt my neck, so I'm no good to you, so you got to pull them out. So I'm, starting to pull all these fans down and sitting them in the cleanest sections of grass that I can find. And, there's only 7 fans. And I'm like, hey, there's only 7 fans. And he's like, well, I sold one. And so then I'm continuing to pull them out. And he's like, just leave me one. And I'm like, well, hold up a second. We agreed on 8. And there's only 7. And that would only be 6. He's like, just leave me one. So I can already tell when I pull them out that one has stiff bearings, and so I check them all, and 2 of them are locked up completely. And so I point them out to him, and I'm like, dude, 2 of these are locked up completely. They're not even usable. He's like, well, just leave me one. I'm like, okay, can I leave you one of the ones with locked up bearings? He's like, no, I can't use that. So, yeah, so I'm pulling all the fans out because I'm not leaving any behind at this point. And so I've got them all out, and I've got 2 screwdrivers because, of course, I didn't even ask if he brought any tools because I already know he didn't. And so I'm like, okay, is it going to hurt your neck too much if you help me take the blades off of these? And he says, actually, I'm in the middle of a family thing. I had my pajamas on. I got to go. So he just takes off and leaves me in the middle of the mud, in the middle of the field. Oh, he says, oh yeah, I've got to go, but nobody should bother you. And he points to one of the abandoned cars, and he says, the guy who lives in that, he won't bother you. And then he points to another one of the sheds, and he's like, the guy who lives in that, he won't bother you. Like, so it's clear that this is just basically like a squatter's camp, and people are living in these abandonments. Not even like abandoned buildings, but like these tiny sheds and cars and things like that. And he's like, yeah, none of them will bother you. And he just takes off. So I'm glad I brought tools in the first place because I would have been completely stuck otherwise. But what I really needed was a vice grips because some of the bolts were to hold the blades on were rusted in place, and my screwdriver couldn't get them. So, I should have brought socket wrenches or vice grips or something, WD-40. So, finally get everything loaded up, and I'm covered in mud, on my way to my gig, covered in mud, and I'm in the middle of the field, and, so I pull off and try to find a Dollar Tree, because Dollar Tree is totally awesome, and if anything will get the mud out of my clothes and shoes, it'll be totally awesome. And I get to the Dollar Tree, and all the lights are on, there are cars out front, but it closed at 7. So I did end up taking all 7 fans of the 8 that I should have gotten, and we'll see. Me and Metal Pete, I'll probably give Metal Pete something to work on, and I'll work on some, and we'll see how many we can get working, and you know, see if they're going to be restored or just left intact or what we're going to do with them. But, yeah, so I called to tell, first I called to tell the person who sent me the link, like, hey, told you so, this guy was a douche, but they didn't answer their phones. Then I called to tell my wife the story, and she got mad at me because she's like, you could have been killed. That guy was probably on drugs or something. You know, she was real upset. You know, that's what wives and moms and just, you know, people that care, especially women that care, probably guys too, tend to do. But, you know, like I said, I already, just from talking to the guy on OfferUp, I knew he wasn't no good. You know, and so you kind of got to trust that instinct. You know, you got to, you know how to read people and know what you're getting into. So, because I already knew, you know, I knew to expect something. I didn't know what to expect. I don't know that anybody, you know, could have predicted, yeah, you'll be up to your ankles in mud in the middle of a field of abandoned cars. That's, you know, I don't know that anybody can predict that, but I already knew it wasn't going to be just an easy, normal pickup. So I'm on my way to my gig, and, there's 2 fan collectors well, 3 fan collectors in Michigan that I know of, and I texted all of them, and Eric has to work, so I probably won't see him, plus he has a new baby. I'd love to meet his wife and new baby, but that's probably not going to happen. Haven't heard back from Binky, and Jeff and I, who you guys know from his videos with Reese, Jeff and I might meet up on my trip back. I've got to pick up some fans from him, and he's been a friend of mine for years, so I'd love a chance to just, you know, hang out with him just for a little bit on my trip. So we'll see. Other than that, I don't have any fan plans in Michigan. I contacted some people that I know that have island fans here just to see if they wanted to sell them, and one person said they weren't ready yet. The other person said, hey, how much you offering? And I said, depending on the finish and the condition, 75 tops, and they're like, that's not enough. So, and I'm not going to pay more than 75 bucks for an island fans, unless it was new in box and a rare finish. Excuse me, maybe like new in box and the really early variable speed version. Although I don't know that I really want the earlier version, because the earlier version is one with the plastic blade arms. And if you get to the ones with the metal blade arms, those are basically indestructible. The whole fan. The flywheels don't die. The blade arms don't break. You know, motor housing's pretty solid. The canopies seem like the most fragile part, but I've never even found one with a broken canopy. You know, they just seem like an indestructible fan. The only thing I've ever found bad on those is the finish and the bearings. You know, and those aren't, you know, that's not the worst thing in the world. So yeah. But anyhow, yeah, they said 75, I said 75 tops, and they said no thanks. But they did send me a picture of it, and I put that on my Instagram. So if you're my friend on Instagram, you know, check that out. It's a real nice one. And what else? Every time I think about driving through Michigan, I think about those K63 Columbia 500s that Jack got from here. I wish I would have got those. I was actually in Michigan at the time and just didn't see the listing. I think I checked before I left for Michigan, and it was posted while I was in Michigan, and then by the time I got back home, I saw it. And then by the time I called the seller, Jack had bought them. So, you know, those are the breaks sometimes. And what else? I mean, I'd like to get all the island fans from Michigan and, you know, so on and so forth, but can't buy everything, and I don't have room for everything anyway. So what else is Michigan known for? Michigan is definitely known for island fans, Magic Heat, but I never find the Magic Heats here. You know, I see them all over the country, but never here. So I don't know what the deal is with Magic Heat. They were made on the other side of the state anyways. Island fans were made in Grand Rapids, which is pretty close to where I just was. I don't know, the Michigan guys find a lot of cool stuff here. A lot of Fascos, a lot of K63 Emersons, and just, you know, it's one of those states that just inexplicably has a lot of cool fans. which is rare. Wisconsin doesn't generally have a lot of cool fans. We get the most we have is like, mid to late 80s and 90s Casablanca and Homesteads. We have a lot of those, and I can even point out the showrooms that sold them. That's what Wisconsin is known for. Oh, there's another part of the story, or a different story. The first time I came to Michigan, which was back in probably sometime between 2000 and 2001, I was playing behind a preacher. I was still a kid, and I was touring with this preacher playing organ, and he took me to Michigan to, play behind him for some services and stuff like that. And somewhere along the route where we stopped at a couple rest stops that had brown ring fans. And I remember when I first told people about that, nobody believed me that ring fans came in brown. Of course, now I've seen them other places, and 2 other collectors have found them, and, so now we know that brown ring fans are a thing. But, so I'm going to stop at this rest area here. I've stopped at 2 so far, and one of them had just some new hunters, and it looked like a new rest stop, so I don't think that they replaced cars this way. Some of these are confusing. I don't think they replaced any ring fans, plus the layout looked very different than the one that I remember. And then I stopped at a second one that looked a lot like the one that I remember, but it didn't have fans. So that LED light is blinking. So for you guys that hate LED lights, there's something you can hang on to. Oh, what? Brown ring fans, maybe? Brown somethings. I don't think they're rings, though. So, we'll go in there and we'll see, though, because that's what videos. Yeah, those aren't rings. So I skipped one rest stop, and now I wished I hadn't, because that one probably had the brown rings. So there's your blinky LED, and I mostly like the LED street lights and parking lot lights because I find them a lot easier to see while I'm driving. Yeah, those are curved blade things. Those are not rings. They could be pro lines. Nope, they've got canopies. More can arms. I guess can arms. But this is the type of rest stop that had the brown rings. So I've told you all my stories now. And I'm going to use the restroom, and then I'll do a separate video of these fans. Because I don't think everybody's going to make it 22 minutes in. So, thanks for watching.